All right, master plan part 3. The thing that is needed at very large scale that is not currently present is a vast amount of battery energy storage. With a pretty, really a remarkably small amount of Earth's land area.
30 terawatts, 240 terawatt hours, $10 trillion. Just looking at it from a growth rate perspective, how much do we need to grow the deployment of these technologies? We're talking about only a 3x growth rate in solar and wind deployment. When we look at the electric vehicles, they have to grow 11x.
Hello, fellow humans. What you have just heard is a capitalist delusion. Globally, we have already passed the limits of what Earth can sustain. The only path forward to bring humans in balance with nature is with policies of degrowth applied in the rich global north. When we talk about degrowth, the shortest and the densest definition I can give is this. Degrowth is the expansion of freedoms for all humans within the limits of Earth by reducing production and consumption to lighten ecological footprint, planned democratically in the spirit of social justice and with concern for well-being. When it comes to energy use, for example, we can achieve zero emissions with more mobility and less mining, according to this study. Reduction will come and has to come from less personal vehicle ownership, smaller EV batteries, and significantly more recycling. This is nowhere near the agenda of business owners that know only one thing: growth. Yet, they do not seem to understand that growth does not exist in a vacuum. Even lithium comes from somewhere. The extraction of lithium is devastating to the environment. The choices are simple. The first path is that we will slow down by disaster. We all get an electric car and remain stuck in traffic. Ecosystems around us will collapse. Our economy will enter recession just like during the pandemic. The second choice is we will slow down by design. We decarbonize transportation and switch to public, high-quality, very reliable transportation. What if we had electrified urban rail transportation that came every 5 minutes and covered the entire city? And electric buses that would make personal cars obsolete? Of course, there are many issues to consider, such as population density. Indeed, density matters, but culture and politics matter perhaps even more. Compare Birmingham, England, that has about 65% of trips occurring with private vehicles. Berlin has less than half of that. Both cities have similar population densities of around 50 persons per hectare. Having degrowth by design or disaster seems inevitable. Economist Peter Victor shows a technical model how we can have a prosperous economy without economic growth. Other authors explain that the relations between degrowth by design and degrowth by disaster are complex because in some cases, disaster can be an opportunity for design. In other cases, an opportunity for deeper recession. A transition away from capitalism by design is unlikely, and yet, by relying on a crisis alone, it won't happen. We must be ready to deploy design when disaster will start to kick in. It is very likely this will happen in the next 10 to 20 years, well within our lifetime. What can we do now? We can experiment with new institutions, infrastructures, or forms of organization. For example, when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, it resulted in billions in damages and the destruction of roughly 80% of its agriculture. It was during this dark and frightening moment, when little aid was available, that democratically run community centers, such as Casa Pueblo in the city of Adjuntas, provided solar-powered energy, food, and mutual aid to citizens. We can implement reforms that transform policies and institutions and fundamentally democratize the economy. The pandemic showed how the state can readily intervene to stabilize the economy, like the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. What if we had a permanent benefit that would take away monstrous wealth from the ruling class and lifted billions out of poverty? Permanently. We can attack directly the hegemony of capitalism in times of crisis. Massive strikes, as they are happening now in France, massive disruptions of the fossil fuel industry and of the banks that pay for fossil extraction. All these are extremely important and will amplify and must amplify. We must also attack the ruling class head-on and tax billionaires and multimillionaires out of existence. While we sharpen our metaphorical pitchforks against the ruling elite, we will not forget that crises are charged with extreme risk. They often strengthen fascism, reinforce the idea that eternal economic growth is good. They keep capitalism strong and the police state that support it. This is what degrowth scholar Jason Hickel had to say about degrowth to the Dutch parliament just a few days ago.
And difficult juncture in history. The present direction of our civilization is clearly untenable, and the solutions that are being promised by our political classes appear to be inadequate to the crisis that we face. But we're at an impasse, uncertain about what needs to be done and how to do it. The old world is dying, and the new world is struggling to be born. And yet, according to the IPCC, existing government policies have us on track for 3.2 degrees of global warming this century, in the lifetime of present generations. Humans have never lived on such a planet. People want to change course, but we are trapped by certain structural features of the capitalist system. The key problem we face is that capitalism is organized around and dependent on perpetual growth, ever-increasing levels of industrial production. We have an economy that massively overuses resources and energy, and yet remarkably nonetheless still fails to meet many basic human needs. To meet the Paris Agreement goals, nations need to cut their emissions fast enough to stay within their fair shares of the global carbon budget for 1.5 degrees. In its latest report, the IPCC points to scholarship on degrowth as an alternative path. Degrowth research, let me specify, embraces efficiency improvements. It embraces technological innovation, but it recognizes that this alone will not be enough, and therefore also calls for rich nations to abandon GDP growth as an objective and scale down destructive and less necessary forms of production to reduce energy and material use directly.
The tough choice between post-capitalism by design or by disaster will soon ignite a spark in the minds and souls of hundreds of millions of humans. Perhaps billions will flood the streets of cities in Delhi, Tokyo, Washington, Berlin, Lagos. Humans will shut down capitalism with indefinite strikes, will keep oil and lithium in the ground, while at the same time, the new world will be born. Check out my other videos to learn more about the degrowth movement and how we can replace capitalism with the well-being economy. We can have enough for everyone, forever. Join us on our Discord server, links below. I would like to thank my supporters for saving me from capitalist advertising. They have my eternal gratitude. If you can support this channel, please visit my Patreon page or donate a coffee. Thank you.